Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Jeremy Scherf, Central Region Service Forestry Coordinator with the ODNR Division of Forestry and the Ohio Tree Farm Committee's Inspector Training Chair, who will address the topic, Money Does Grow on Trees. We'll be talking about the hidden value of your woodlands and how good management choices can grow the value exponentially. You'll learn a step-by-step approach to managing, harvesting, and getting all the benefits a healthy woodlands can provide. Jeremy, you're on.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I've done this presentation quite a few times, but it's always been with a large group of people, and I usually try to get a good bit of interaction. So we'll see how this goes today. I would be a little remiss if I didn't give a little bit of credit to Guernsey County Farm Bureau for this presentation. It started out of a conversation I had with one of their members and culminated in about 140 people showing up kind of last minute, filled a room, and we had a good conversation that evening. So, but you know, money does grow on trees, and that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So we've already been through that a little bit. So I can't help but not share this this comic, given that we're right smack in the middle of maple syrup season. So I hope you get a little chuckle out of that. But, you know, for tree farmers, this is pretty obvious. I designed this presentation for a wide range of landowners. But, you know, as landowners, you manage your crops, your pasture, your wildlife, your livestock, all kinds of things on your property. But most landowners overlook one hugely important part of their property, which is the forest. Now, as tree farmers, you guys are embracing the forest. You're generally not overlooking it, but that's not the case for most landowners. So timber is a long rotation crop that can be very profitable if managed, and if the timber harvests are done properly. And properly is a key word there. A properly managed stand of timber will grow more volume and higher quality wood than an unmanaged stand, which seems to make sense. Let's talk about value a little bit in that woods. Agriculture in Ohio is a $124 billion industry. That's a B, billion with a B. The forestry sector is 26.3 billion of that. Just the forestry sector alone is 26.3 billion here in Ohio. And Ohio is first in the nation in home furniture production. There's some arguments out there of whether we're really first or we're not first, and maybe some years we are or aren't, but we're definitely up there. So that's the thing to keep in mind. Home furniture, and a lot of that is our Amish sector. Let's look at some comparisons to other industries here in Ohio. We already said forest products, 26.3 billion. The oil and gas industry is 40 billion and rising. The coal industry is 14 billion and falling. Parks, recreation, and wildlife, that's people hiking, hunting, fishing, you know, using our parks and buying binoculars, things like that. That's only 5 billion. But that's what everybody seems to think about. And industrial minerals, that's things like salt and limestone and things like that, is 1 billion. So I think this forest products industry is a lot bigger than the average person realizes. So we said Ohio is first in the nation home furniture production. We're third in pallet production, 8th in cabinet production, and 9th in millwork production. Let's talk about some other values. What about log exports? I think the average landowner would be shocked if they knew how many logs from Ohio are being put on a container and shipped overseas. There's a huge market in that. Whiskey and wine barrels. I think the COVID pandemic has only increased the use of whiskey and wine barrels. But this is a hugely increasing market out there. There's a plant down in Jackson, Ohio. Dave is extremely familiar with it. But they've surpassed goals that they set for themselves in barrel production. And those barrels are all made out of high quality white oak coming from right here in Ohio. The key point of all this is Ohio grows some of the highest quality and most valuable timber in the world. Other states, other countries want the timber that we grow here because of its quality and its beauty. So all that kind of leads us up to remind you is that your timber can be very valuable. And it's not something you want to make a decision upon lightly. But if that timber is so valuable, why do so many landowners sell it for a third of what it's really worth? It happens all the time. And as a landowner, who do you trust? Who has your best interest at heart? Who is looking out for you? How can you compare offers from different timber buyers? With timber, there are many different value or factors that affect the value. You need to do your homework and really think about what you're doing. So let's talk about timber value a little bit. So what's a tree worth? If I had a whole group of people here, I'd be asking somebody to tell me what is a tree worth. But how do you answer that question? All right, let's narrow it down a little bit. What's an oak tree worth? Okay, I'm going to narrow it a little bit more. What's a white oak tree worth? So each one of these builds a little bit and gives us a little more information. What's that white oak tree worth? What about this white oak tree? So just to say what a tree is worth is an extremely difficult question to answer. So some of the things that influence that timber value, the most logical one seems to be species. Is it a white oak? Is it a yellow poplar, an aspen, a red oak, a cherry, a walnut? All those have very different values. What about the diameter of the tree? Is it a 16-inch diameter tree or a 26-inch diameter tree? The diameter is going to affect the price per board foot as well, not just the total value of the tree. The length of the log, are we selling 8-foot logs, 10-foot logs, 16-foot logs? The quality of the tree, obviously, is probably the other thing you think about after species. Is it a high quality veneer log, or is it a log in the second picture there full of defects? Even the color of the wood can factor into this. Is it a dark colored hard maple or a real bright white hard maple? You don't know that till you cut the tree down and look at the wood inside it. The spacing of the rings can factor into value. Are they close together? Are they wide and far apart? Or does it vary throughout the growth of the tree where it speeds up in growth and slows back down? Obviously, defects in the tree, insect damage. What about the volume per acre? How many trees per acre are we growing, or how many trees per acre are we allowing them to cut? Is it 2 or 3 trees per acre or 30 trees per acre? That's going to affect the amount that the logger can pay, or it's going to affect how efficient he is in getting the trees out of the woods. How many creek crossings are on your property? Is there none, or is there 5? Each of those costs a logger money. Is going to affect the value that they can pay for your trees. The distance to the mill. It's one we don't think about very often. A lot of sawmills like to buy their timber within a 100-mile radius of where they're at. But is that sawmill 5 miles down the road or 75 miles down the road? It's going to have a factor, especially when diesel fuel prices are high. And then road access. This is one of my forester friends reminds me a lot when I talk about a landowner who wants to sell timber. He asks me, is it on a gravel road or a paved state route? It's going to have a factor into the time of year they can cut it and the ease of access and things like that. So all these things are going to factor into what the trees on your property can be worth. So let's look at a couple white oak trees. Let's compare a 16-inch white oak to a 26-inch white oak. So that 16-inch tree is going to have 2 16-foot logs in it. The 26-inch diameter tree is going to have 3 16-foot logs in it because the tree's probably grown longer. It's been able to get taller over time. That 16-inch tree has 116 board feet. That 26-inch tree has 619 board feet. That 16-inch tree is going to be worth on average about $400 per 1,000 board feet. Because it's not that big yet, it hasn't grown the high quality clear lumber that they're really looking for. And then that 26-inch tree is going to be worth more like $800 a 1,000 board feet. And these prices are going to vary, but this is just to throw some numbers out there. So that 16-inch diameter tree is worth $46.40. And how many landowners really want to sell a tree for $46? But a lot of those 16-inch white oaks get cut, unfortunately. But that 26-inch diameter tree is going to be worth almost $500. So the point of that is we want to let these trees get some size to them because they can, increase a lot in value. And what's the time frame here? It could be 25 years, give or take, depends on the productivity of your soil, how much room to grow the tree has, a variety of things. So let's look at same size trees, 26-inch diameter tree, 3 16-foot logs, 619 board feet. Let's compare different species to see how they compare in value. Now, I'm sure there'd probably be some arguments in the room about, what values I put on these trees, but these are just a snapshot in time. So that white oak's worth $495. A black cherry, same size, $247. Yellow poplar, $266. Red maple, $282. Those three trees are all in similar value right now. And a black walnut's up at $923. So when we ask what's a tree worth, there's a lot of questions we need to know. The size, the species in this case. So I do have an asterisk on yellow poplar, and it's one of the things in 20 years of being a forester and working with landowners, I hear all the time is, yeah, I got a bunch of yellow poplar, but it's not worth much. And that can be true. If a white oak's worth 60 or 80 cents board foot, that yellow poplar is worth 15 to 25 cents a board foot. But the thing about yellow poplar is, in many cases, in the right soils, it grows almost twice as fast as your other trees do. It gets a lot taller. So you might have a 3-log tall white oak, and you're going to have a 4 or 5 log yellow poplar. So you get more volume per tree. They also have less taper in them too than some of the other species do. So you can get a little more volume out of the tree. So don't discount yellow poplar just because the price of it's a little bit low. It makes up for itself in its growth and its volume. So, plus it adds a lot of volume to a timber sale, which helps brings up your overall price. So again, comparing species. This is a photo here in Guernsey County I took a few years ago. Tree on the left is a white oak. Tree on the right is an American beech. Both similar in size, same location. But if we're talking about value, that white oak tree in this scenario is worth about $140. Beech tree, $33. How many times have you gone in after a timber harvest and they've cut all the white oak and the cherry and the walnut and the red oak and they left all the beech behind? What are we growing for the future? We're growing $33 trees for the future. So it's just something else to think about. I've always loved this. I've always loved Family Circus. I grew up reading it. I found this one somewhere along the way. Somebody colored it in, and they planted a tree, and there he is standing there and says, what about next Arbor Day? Will it be big enough then? He wants to hang his swing in it. And it's just a great reminder that anytime we're working with trees, whether we're planting trees, harvesting trees, managing trees, whatever it is with trees, we're not really doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for a future generation down the road because it takes planning and it takes a long time. I feel like I've been working in forestry I have been working in forestry for 20 years, and it does seem like a long time, but in the tree's life, it's just a glimpse. That tree is going to be standing there long after I'm gone. So let's think about some things. Why do we sell and manage timber? Of course, it provides income. It helps us maintain a healthy forest. We can improve wildlife habitat, and also recreation. Those are all good things that forests provide and things that we can manipulate and improve upon depending on how we manage that forest. So income, a properly managed timber sale can reward you with a nice income, can provide money for other forest management activities and equipment, can pay your property taxes, and can help provide for college education or retirement. So trees need to be thinned to provide ample growing space and limit stress. We can remove diseased trees, remove undesirable trees, promote the growth of better trees. A lot of times just walking around with a chainsaw, cutting down the junk you see is going to help your forest out. And keep in mind, trees are sunlight factories. the more sunlight a tree can absorb, the faster it's going to grow. You're going to grow the same volume of wood in the woods no matter what we do. So if you let it just grow and do its own thing, it's going to grow slowly, and it may not be the best tree that survives and grows fast. But if you go in there with a chainsaw and cut a few of the junk trees down, you're going to put that growth onto your better trees. It's going to be a lesser number of trees, but they're going to be healthier and they're going to grow faster. And that's basically what we're trying to do, is manipulate where we put that growth on. So, and this is something I always try to remind people is a timber harvest should be an improvement to your woods, not a detriment to your woods. So let's think about that a little bit. A lot of people think of this a timber harvest. I don't want to cut my timber. I don't want to destroy my woods. Your timber harvest should improve your woods, not hurt your woods. So keep that in mind. I just love this picture. Some of my colleagues don't like this picture, but this is off of State Forest, Fernwood State Forest, timber sale we marked. The goal in this woods was to maintain some large trees for the public to view and seed source and a variety of other things. But, you know, we marked the tree in the background because of that fork in it. It's actually got a crease in it. It's, you know, a good chance in a windstorm or something that's going to split apart and hit the ground. And we left the tree in the foreground to keep growing. And that's probably a 30-inch plus diameter tree, if I remember correctly. So there were some arguments about whether that tree should be cut, but the goals of that harvest were to cut out what needed to come out and maintain some large trees in there for the public to see and enjoy. So in this case, it's an improvement to that woods. We took out the lower quality tree and we left the better one. And that's the way I look at timber harvesting. You know, at some point, those better quality trees do get mature and do need to come out. But the goal is to take out the lower quality stuff, let the better stuff keep growing. So wildlife habitat, you know, forest management and wildlife management go hand in hand. In case of wildlife in the forest is their habitat. You know, our harvesting techniques, our timber stand improvement is affecting their habitat, be it good or bad. And in most cases, when we cut trees, we get sunlight to the forest floor. That causes regeneration, which is cover and browse and food, which is the things that wildlife needs. So, also in things, you know, like oak trees, if we thin them out, they're going to grow faster and healthier and hopefully produce more acorns and more food for wildlife. So recreation, you know, a lot of times I meet with landowners and their woods hasn't been harvested many, many years. You know, one of the things we talk about is creating some trails so that they can get in and access their woods, whether it's with a tractor or four-wheeler or just hiking, whatever the case is. And doing a timber harvest can be a great way to get those trails created. And then you have that access system that you can get in there and cut your firewood and use in future timber harvests and drag a deer out and whatever the case is. So things to think about before we do cut timber is timber stand improvement. Grapevine control. Grapevine are very destructive to trees. A little bit can be fine. It is a good wildlife food source. You want to make sure they're not growing in good quality trees that you're trying to grow for timber. They get up into the crown, they go after the sunlight, they can twist up the canopy and eventually damage trees or pull trees over. Cull tree removal is simply cutting out the low quality trees that aren't going to be of value. Crop tree release is going in and picking out your good high quality trees that you want to help grow better and cutting trees down around them, hopefully of lesser quality. And we could go on and on and on for hours about invasive species control, tree of heaven, honeysuckle, or, you know, bittersweet, and a variety of autumn olive and a variety of other species. But very, very important to get those under control before we open up the canopy further on the timber harvest. And right after me is going to be Stephanie talking about some potential funding for some of these things. So stay tuned for that. It's important, if you don't have one, to have a forest management plan. If you're a certified tree farm, you should already have one. If you don't have one, the program Stephanie's going to be talking about afterwards can actually help pay for the cost of getting a plan. Alex, in the previous talk, Alex Kinder talked about the plan he had for that property and their harvesting and burns. But it's going to define your property into different stands for management, determine what you have, species-wise, volume, stocking levels, things like that, and then give you recommendations for managing that woods is help it better achieve your goals. It's going to give you a timeline for doing that. It's going to lay out when the timber harvest should take place, whether it's in 2 years or 20 years. And then also provide some maps of the property, topographic maps, aerial maps, soil maps, soils information, basically just about everything you're going to need to know to improve your woods and get it growing better. So when it is time to cut, you and your forester should decide which harvesting method is going to help you better meet your goals. I've listed a few of them here. There are many more types out there, but single tree selection style harvest is what most of us call a selective cut. It's what most people think about, but there's also pre-commercial harvest, such as a crop to release or cutting firewood. A group selection harvest is like a small clear cut. And then of course the ever dreaded, but very good to do at times, clear cut. There's also shelter woods that Alex talked about earlier. I didn't include that because in Eastern Ohio, there's not a whole lot of people wanting to do shelter woods. That's where I put this presentation together for. But we're just going to talk about a few of these. And keep in mind, a diamond limit harvest is not a forest management activity. It doesn't take into consideration the health of the forest. It doesn't take into consideration the residual stand of trees. It's just a quick and easy way to determine which trees to cut, and it's usually not a good one. So try to avoid it. Work with a forester to see what the best method is for your woods. And I should probably, for some of you, describe what a diamond limit harvest is, but that's where every tree over a certain diameter comes out of the woods. This is what they can look like. It's not something the average landowner is really happy with afterwards. So what we usually are trying to recommend landowners do when they want their woods looking nice afterwards is a single tree selection style harvest. You're going to look at every individual tree in the woods and choose the trees that should be harvested based off the health of the tree, the maturity of the trees, and the stand density, which is basically the spacing of the trees. What this does is it takes into consideration the stand you're leaving for the future. When I'm marking timber in this style of cut, I'm looking at every tree in the woods, and I am trying to make sure that the trees I'm leaving are going to meet your goals and stand for a long time. We want to leave those better quality trees growing for the future. So pre-commercial harvest, this is often called timber stand improvement. This is typically before your trees are of marketable size. It allows you to thin out the stand for more vigorous growth. You can select the trees you want to manage for by species, by quality, by size. You get a potential income from selling firewood or just firewood for your own personal use. And it's going to greatly improve the quality of your forest for your future timber harvest. Group selection harvesting is removing small patches of trees, quarter of an acre to 5 acres in size. It lets that stand start over, regenerate naturally. It creates an uneven age stand of timber, so you've got new trees coming up next to your older trees. It does create excellent wildlife habitat and excellent diversity in your property. It's a good option for a landowner that wants to create some wildlife habitat and get some shade intolerant trees growing, such as your oaks and cherries and yellow poplar and things, but doesn't want to clear cut their whole property. There's a picture of what one can look like. Talk about a clear cut a little bit. Clear cuts are, they have a bad rap. Everybody thinks you're destroying the woods. The only way to really destroy your woods is to pave over it with asphalt. It's going to grow back, and that's what we're mimicking. We're mimicking a storm or something that's knocked the woods over and allow it to start over. Trees such as your yellow poplar, your cherry, and some of your oaks need that sunlight and that opportunity to do that, so it doesn't turn into a beech maple forest. We often can use a clear cut when a forest has been high graded many times and the remaining trees are low quality. Provides excellent wildlife habitat. It's pretty easy to do. You mark a boundary and you cut everything inside it. And lets the forest regenerate into an even age stand. So this is off of Scott Galloway's property. He was the Ohio Tree Farm of the Year back in 2004. One of his main goals was grouse habitat. And his woods in many cases was high graded by the previous owner. And in some cases, it wasn't a whole lot left. And this clear cut, he's done multiple clear cuts out there. This one, they took everything out other than this log laying right here. If you can see that, it was actually left as a drumming log for grouse. Subsequent clear cuts later on, we actually left a lot of the tops laying there to help protect the young seedlings from deer browse. But this is 2001. The photo on the left is a much younger and thinner me in 2006. And the photo on the bottom right there is 2014. All of the same chunk of woods, no trees were planted. This is all natural regeneration. And, you know, it's mostly yellow poplar, a little bit of oak, a little bit of red maple. But this was a lot of yellow poplar to begin with, and that's what we expected to come back. Here in 2014, 13 years later, it's already getting beyond grouse habitat, unfortunately. So that's why he's gone on and done some clear cuts in other areas of his property. This is where I get to take a quick drink. So let's talk a little bit about what typically happens when a landowner wants to sell timber and why that shouldn't happen. So normally what I hear is there's a knock on the door, somebody offers to cut your timber, they want to cut it 18 inches and up, and they want to cut the cherry down to, and walnut down to 16 inches. But where are they measuring that? Is it at the stump? Is it at diameter breast height, where we typically talk about diameters? Those are two very different places and very different numbers. But they want to cut the trees and give you 50% of what they sell the trees for. And they offer you some cash, you sign their half-page contract, and things start happening. This is really where you need to stop and think about what's going on and what decisions you're about to make. So you really don't know what's being cut. The trees aren't marked. A lot of times in these scenarios, they go out and mark trees to make you feel better, but that's not really how they're cutting. They cut everything over 18 inches. A lot of times these cuts amount to 30 to 40 trees per acre being harvested out of your woods. You know, most of the time as a forester, I'm recommending 7 to 15 trees per acre. That number is going to vary, but that's a lot of times where it is. And that's the difference between having a woods left when they're done and really not. 30 to 40 trees per acre is a lot of trees to come out of your woods. You know, what if every tree in your woods is over 18 inches diameter? They're cutting them all. There's no consideration for residual stand, for spacing, for species, anything like that. The other problem is you can't compare that price offer with anybody else's because the trees aren't marked. You really don't know what they're cutting. So,
it looks like we lost Jeremy for a second. Hopefully he'll get back on. Tom, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I guess we'll just wait on Jeremy a little bit, see if he comes back on. I assume everybody lost Jeremy like I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, this is Cassie. I can share some of Jeremy's great wisdom while we're waiting for him.
That'd be good. The other thing is we probably got enough other foresters on. We could start answering some of the questions, but go ahead, Cassie.
Yeah, good.
Well, I was going to say that he was talking about those diameter base cuts, and And we had a guy that came off onto our tree farm from I don't know where without asking and marked our oaks and came and said, hey, I want to give you $50,000 for these trees that I've helped myself to marking on your property. And my husband thought, $50,000, that sounds a lot like a new pickup truck, right? And I said, well, we better call Jeremy. And so we called Jeremy, and he graciously came out and one of the things he said, let's just say that, you were in your grandma's barn and you look under a tarp and you see an old Ford Mustang, and somebody comes by and says, I'll give you $50,000 for that. That sounds like a lot of money, but that's the only guy that's seen your Ford Mustang, and he's going to come out and offer you $50,000. What do you think it's really worth? So that was some of Jeremy's wisdom about these guys that come one at a time and bid on your trees. So I think he was heading for getting competitive bidding. So I'll turn it back to you, Dave, for some questions.
Yeah, that's actually one of the comments in the panelist window is a tree is worth whatever someone's willing to pay you for it. But if it's not a competitive process, then it's not a good thing. And then the other really big key is if everybody's not bidding on the trees that are marked or the exact same trees, then it's hard to have a fair process too.
There's two other keys, Dave. One, the concept of I'm going to get you a 50% check of what I sell them for. Really? How do you know? And then more importantly, you just became that logger's partner, which means that you as a landowner are liable for anything that he did or didn't do while he's on your property. Like, for example, not paying his workers' comp insurance so one of his workers gets hurt, or a little kid coming on your property when his equipment is idle and hurting themselves. So, I mean, it's just done all the time. Just saw it again 3 weeks ago, but man, not a good idea. And finally, get your money up front. Every dime up front. So enough said there.
Yep. And also with the 50-50 deal, you're not probably going to qualify for capital gains treatment on your proceeds of your timber sale. So you're going to take it there too. You're going to pay more taxes. Jeremy just texted and said he's trying to get on. So one thing, and Stephanie, you can pitch in here too from Division, but one thing I just put in the chat box is called beforeyoucut.com website, which is a great resource for folks. And it might be later in Jeremy's presentation, but it's a collaborative effort with DNR and Extension. We started it in Ohio back in about 2006 to make it a statewide program. Before that, it was just a local effort by the folks down in Athens County. And many of you probably remember Dave Schatz. And he was the guy that I think the brainchild behind it. But we went statewide, and now it's in several states, more than 10 states. So callbeforeyoucut.com is a great resource to just get packet of information if you're thinking about selling timber. And with this, Tom, where are we at on time, and do we want to?
We've got until 11:50.
Okay.
So we're good to go on time.
Hi, this is Cassie again. I'll also give a shout out to one of our sponsors here, which is Pixel. I did a commercial thinning and I worked with them, and they are SFI certified. And so when they did the commercial thinning, we had a pre-walk, we had a final walk. We talked about how they're going to replant the landings for wildlife. Having a good contract and having those visits with whoever's going to do your cutting before and after, to me, that was just priceless.
Okay, I saw Jeremy pop it in a second.
I'm back.
He's back.
All right.
I don't know what just happened.
Joys of technology. We've
Yeah.
just been filling folks in with information about selling timber. Jim just shared Savage, the reason why you don't want to do a 50-50 deal because of liability and tax burdens in that. And Cassie's been, I'm glad you couldn't hear it because your head might be too big. She's kind of been talking you up a little bit. So you might try to reshare your screen again and see if we can get it rolling.
Yeah, let's see here. You
You're
find
good.
it? We're good?
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I think I was getting ready to talk about the contract here. The contract they're handing you when they're knocking on your door is designed to protect them. It's not designed to protect you. And you really want that contract to protect you. So, and I think Jim may have hit on this when we were off, but I'll just restate it because it is important. In that 50-50 sale agreement, you become a partner with that logger. So if that log truck pulls off your property and gets into an accident, somebody gets hurt and they're going to sue, you're potentially 50% liable for those damages as well. So it's something I didn't even know until recent years. So pretty important to think about whether you want to be in that business arrangement or not. The other things you hear about, many landowners complain they don't get the money they were promised. He told me if we cut this, it was going to be $40,000, but I only got 20, or I only got 25. Your trees have been sold at that point, so you can't take them back. You can't decide to sell to somebody else or do something different. The way we typically recommend timber be sold, the trees are marked, they're sold on the stump. They're still standing in your woods when you sell them. If you don't get the offers you'd like, then you can refuse them and try again another time. Your trees are still growing, they're still standing. So it takes a lot of your risk away. So, and the result too is usually a pretty unhappy landowner. The woods is a mess. The goals they had for that property, have been changed now, or are going to be, aren't going to be attainable. Variety of things like that. So, and the landowner often is only getting a third of what those trees are really worth, and a lot of times they don't even realize it. So, it really is important to do your homework. So, our recommendation is to work with a professional forester, and that is somebody that has a degree in forestry, that understands how timber is managed. There's a lot of people out there that are going to give you advice on how you should sell your timber, including your neighbor's favorite cousin's third brother divorced from his sister type of thing. They may not always, have your best interests at heart or really understand how things work. So, but a forester is going to evaluate your woods, talk with you about your goals for the property, and then help advise you on a method of harvesting that's going to improve your woods, get you a good and fair value for your timber. And those are some of the important things that I hope you're concerned about. The forester is going to mark the trees that are to be harvested. Usually we put a paint mark at about chest high, maybe two sides of the tree, or a ring all the way around it. And we also put a stump mark on it down at the ground. That way, when the tree is sold and cut down, there's a paint mark on that stump. It's a tree that was included in that harvest. Every tree they mark can be inventoried, so they're going to measure for diameter, and height and species. And then they're going to have an approximate value of that timber that's sold. Now you have a list of what you're selling. The species, the volume, the number of trees, the average diameters, all that stuff. And we can say, okay, it's worth approximately X number of dollars. And then they're going to solicit bids from good quality loggers to harvest that timber. And now when your bids come in, you can compare them to your estimated value and, see how those compare. Usually the bids kind of blow you away. With marked trees, you can now compare offers. You get 5 loggers bidding on your timber. The trees are marked. They're all bidding on the same trees. They're only allowed cutting what's marked. The forester will oversee the harvest, make sure they're only cutting the marked trees, make sure the residual trees are not being damaged. They're going to make sure your roads are installed properly and maintained properly. Erosion control measures are being used. And when the harvest is all over, make sure everything's reclaimed the way they needs to be. Make sure your needs, the things you're hoping for, are met, and that everybody's hopefully happy. So, where can you find assistance? I'm a service forester with Division of Forestry. There's also private consulting foresters, industry foresters. In OSU Extension, your county soil and water conservation district offices are usually great sources of information. So service forestry wise, we have 22 service foresters throughout Ohio. Our services are free, which also pertain to us being very busy. But there are limitations to what we can do. We're probably not going to mark your timber. We're not allowed to help you sell it. You know, we are here to offer that advice to you and get you moving and help you manage your woods. And then when it is time to actually harvest your timber, you're going to probably lean on a consulting forester or an industry forester for that. Service foresters want to provide you the unbiased opinion and advice in your woods. Since we're not going to help you sell it, we're not going to make any money off of your timber. You know, hopefully the advice we're giving you is not based off of the dollar. At least you can be assured of that. And, you know, it's on the best management of your woods and your goals. Not that anyone else is necessarily biased due to dollar, but, you know, we're removed from that part of it. Consulting foresters, you know, they'll come out and do anything you want them to do for a fee. I don't mean that in a negative way, but they're private individuals and they have to make, you know, they have to make a living. You know, usually if you're wanting to cut timber, I can't speak for everyone, but usually they're no different than any other contractor. You want somebody to paint your house, they come out, meet with you, look at your house, take some measurements, and give you an estimate, you know, a free estimate of what it's going to cost to paint your house. If you want somebody to come out and handle a timber sale for you, usually the forester is going to come out, go for a walk, talk with you about your options and things, and you know, tell you what they'll do for you, and then you call them if you want to hire them. That visit's probably free. You hire them, then you move on with your timber sale. Usually they're working off a percentage of the timber sale. Just make sure you ask for references. And a couple places to get lists is the Association of Consulting Foresters does have a website. I don't have it listed here, but they have a list. And then the Ohio Society of American Foresters has a consulting forester directory as well. Industry foresters, there are some sawmills and logging companies out there that do employ foresters. They have their backgrounds no different than mine. They can offer you great advice and harvesting assistance, set up a timber harvest for you. And they can offer you a direct line to their sawmill. You know, they do work for the sawmill that employs them. So more than likely, you know, that's going to be their sawmill that's buying your timber. So, so now what? So you've worked with a forester. Hopefully you've done your grapevine control or your invasive species control. You're ready for a harvest. Well, a few other things we want to think about. So what are you going to sell? How are you going to sell it? What kind of contract are you going to use? Where will the deck be? The deck's where they're going to load their logs, like we see in this photo here. Keep in mind, this is going to be a major impact on your woods, no matter how good of a harvest you do. And you're probably going to have your eyes open if you've not done one before. So it's good to think about these things. So the contract is probably the most important aspect of your timber sale. It dictates everything that is going to happen before, during, and after the timber harvest. If it's not in that contract, you probably should not expect it to happen. If you're using a consulting forester to sell your timber, they're writing that contract up to protect you. So the logger is going to sign your contract. And that's probably a good thing for you, the landowner. We want to talk about erosion control, BMPs, best management practices. This is what we don't want to happen. So that's what we're trying to avoid. The Division of Forestry, in partnership with each county soil and water office, does oversee erosion issues on logging jobs. So if there's a complaint about an erosion issue, it usually goes to the county soil and water office. They go out and look at it. And then if they need further assistance with it, they'll pull us in. We have one person designated that, and our service foresters can help as well. But the goal is to correct any bad practices and give advice so that loggers, you know, can get some more education on in that given scenario what the best thing to do is prevent erosion. If we're part of this tree farm annual meeting, which is part of the Ohio Forestry Association annual meeting, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the OFA Master Logger Program. Brad would probably hit me with a board, I guess. But you know, loggers who are members of OFA and are certified master loggers are trained to use BMPs to reduce soil erosion and improve the appearance of timber harvesting activities. They employ safe and efficient timber cutting and logging safety practices, use first aid and CPR, maintain workers' compensation on their employees. You know, all these things, if you're a certified tree farmer, that you should be making sure you're doing anyways. They also have to provide liability coverage. They participate in advanced training and periodic recertifications. And they're a member of the local loggers chapter and Ohio Forestry Association. So if you're cutting timber and you're working with your forester, one of the things you may want to do is request that a master logger be involved in that harvest. Wrapping up here, one more thing to think about is taxes. We all hate taxes. You know, they are inevitable though. My best advice, you know, if you're going to sell timber, think about this ahead of time. There are some costs involved with your timber sale that you can deduct if you plan for it. Make sure you talk with an educated tax advisor that knows forestry. There's a lot of people out there that know taxes, but not as many of them do know forestry taxes. You know, your fee that you pay your consulting forester is probably deductible from the taxes you pay in your timber sale. If you need to buy a culvert because you want a permanent culvert in, that could be deductible, some of those things. So another good resource is timbertax.org. I've even referred tax advisors to timbertax.org. So this is where I usually have a group, and after we've gone through all this, this is what I am trying to find out is what are your fears at this point? What questions can we answer? And what you know, what do you need help with so you can take that next step and move forward? So,
Jeremy, can you see the Q&A piece, or do you?
I lost it. No, I can't because I lost it when I had to reboot.
I can help you. So we got a question submitted by Stan Collins. Excuse me, the slide depicting average tree value by species, were those suggested values at the mill or still on the ground?
Those are on the ground. Those are stumpage prices standing in the woods. And don't, you know, take that with a grain of salt. That's a snapshot out of one picture in time. Don't expect to go and sell a tree for that price tomorrow. It's just to kind of compare values at a given point in time.
Gives you a ballpark.
Yep.
And then the next question is, how is the best way to turn old fields back into forests?
Well, there's quite a few different ways to do that, and some of it depends on how picky you are as to what comes in. The majority of our woods in Ohio came back on their own, naturally reverted. You know, somebody stopped farming it and let it go, and it might have taken 40 years, but trees seeded in and took over. That's certainly one way you can do it. The problem with that today we have is invasive species such as bush honeysuckle and autumn olive and tree of heaven. Those are all going to come in too, more than likely if there's a seed source nearby. So you're going to have to put some effort into controlling those. Another option is tree planting, and that's obviously a good option as well. Stephanie's going to talk about EQIP afterwards. It does provide some funds for tree planting. But really, you know, if you're not going to go the natural route and you want to go and plant trees, work with a forester to look at the soils, see what species are going to grow best on that site, because you don't want to plant the wrong species.
I don't see more questions. There is a comment. It said they had a timber tax basis done and did not have to pay tax on like commercial thinning proceeds, which seems a little bit, it would lower your taxes on your, if it's a commercial, so it would lower your taxes. But you have anything else to say about the timber tax basis?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. You know, this presentation was an hour and 25 minutes the first time I did it. So I had cut some things out of it just because I talk too much usually. And that's probably one thing that got cut. It is a timber tax basis. If you have purchased your property, it's probably something you want to look at doing. If you inherited a property and have no dollar amount in it, then it may not do you any good. But, you know, it can save you a lot of money when you sell timber down the road. It's a whole presentation in itself, so I don't want to dig into it too much, but it's definitely something you should look into doing.
In short, you're paying taxes on your your net, not your gross. So if you can document what you've invested when you bought the property, then you can save a lot of money on taxes. So definitely something to consider. Got a new question popped in from Bruce. Clarify CAUV eligibility as it appears to timber only, such as property that does not have field crops. When did this change? Not sure.
Yeah, CAUV is an interesting thing because we got 88 different counties in Ohio. So we've got 88 different county auditors. And sometimes it seems like there's 128 different interpretations of how CAUV works. Every county does it a little bit differently. In general, you definitely can qualify for CAUV with forest land. In general, the auditor may make you have a forest management plan and follow that plan to be eligible. You really need to talk to your county auditor and find out what their requirements are going to be. And if for some reason you don't like that program, you can come look at Ohio Forest Tax Law, which is a program that we administer at Division of Forestry.
Okay, one more question popped in. Have you heard of a timber inventory appraisal?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a part of your basis if you want to establish a basis. But basically they come in and measure the trees you have in your woods, determine what the volume is currently, and then what it's worth, and now you've got a value to start with of what it's what your whole forest is worth. Then you'd have to break that down to see what a harvest might be worth.
One that popped in the chat window is person said, I have a 74-acre certified tree farm and just purchased another 17 acres not attached. Can I add it to my tree farm?
Well, this is the Chuck White that I'm pretty sure it is. No, you can't do anything, Chuck. You're a pain in my butt. No, Chuck's an awesome landowner. You can put it in tree farm, but it would have to be a separate tree farm because it's not contiguous. And it's actually, Chuck, I know you bought that property and something I've kind of thought about getting with you on. But we can talk about that separately of if it's got to have 10 acres of woods to be eligible.
Another comment, and I shared it in the chat window for everybody. There's a link to the Ohio ACF site that is shared. I'm going to put another website. OSAFdirectory.com is another place you can find foresters. And see what else we've got here. There was a comment also that if you spell out callbeforeyoucut.com, it is not the ODNR extension site. So I put in the correct address for that website. It's call with the letter B, the number 4, youcut.com. So that's shared in the link too. And I think we're caught up on questions at this point. Wait, one more. Do some contractors use crane mats to cross streams and at landings? From Charles.
Yeah. And crane mats, but also oil rig mats. Those are in Eastern Ohio are becoming almost free. And so a lot of loggers are starting to use them. And yeah, it's using them more and more, and they're perfectly acceptable. Using the cross streams, use them in wet spots, use them on the deck where they're going to back the trucks in and out instead of putting gravel down. The nice thing about them is they're reusable. You can take them to the next job and use them again. Where gravel, you put it down, you're not picking it back up. So it's certainly a great option.
I'm trying to monitor. I think we're caught up.
So
I actually got done early.
I've got one here for Jeremy. He mentioned earlier that if he hadn't mentioned the Ohio Master Logger program, I'd probably hit him with a board. Well, actually, I had a nice little wooden go slugger bat here all ready for you.
Yeah.
Lucky he's a few miles away, so you probably can't reach him quite from where you are. Okay, one more. What is your opinion on getting a performance bond from a logger?
That's a side of things I don't deal with a lot. I would really talk with your consulting forester about that. I mean, overall, it's not a bad idea. And a lot of them do it, and it provides some assurance that, hopefully you can hold something that, if you need something else done, that they're going to do it. Too many times I've seen cases where landowners just think it's extra money for them, and they hold on to it and then they refuse to give it back because they want to keep it. And that's where you want some assurances that if the logger does what he's supposed to, they're going to get that money back. But definitely talk to your consulting forester about that and how they handle those things.
Yeah, it's another tool you can put in the contract, and it's spelled out clearly. It could be a very good tool for you, but it's one you just need to get some advice from a preferably consulting forester to help you with that clause. Charles, can H&B make a bat to check for social distancing? I think that's for you, Brad.
You were saying a bat for social distancing?
That's the question.
That one was a little short. That one was only about 20 inches long. So I'll have to get a bigger one made.
It depends on your arm length. Maybe it
Yeah.
depends on the other person having a bat too. Who knows?
Yeah, if you both have a bat, keep it touched up, you'd be good.
And then Susan asked about the website for Call Before You Cut. So I'm putting it back in, and it is call, spelled out CALL, the letter B, the number 4, the letter U, cut.com. And if you do a Google search for Call Before You Cut, but be sure to put DNR or Division of Forestry in, you'll see a site that pops up that has a map with multiple states that you click on Ohio, and it'll bring you Ohio specific info. And then you can also call the 800 number, which I'll put back in. And I think we're caught up now.
Well, thanks everyone. I hope you gained something out of it, and reach out to me if you have any questions anytime.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. We have a little bit of time, actually.